Although members of the public can't join us in person tonight, our meetings remain open to the public via the live stream on our website, and I extend a warm welcome to all of you who are watching. On behalf of Moonee Valley City Council, I respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which Moonee Valley is located, the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people of the Kulin Nation, and we pay respects to their spirits, ancestors, community members and elders past, present and emerging. We also extend this respect to other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. Item 3 on the agenda is apologies and leave of absence, and councillors, I have not received either for tonight's meeting. Item 4, confirmation of minutes. Councillors, can I please have a mover and a seconder that the minutes from the council meetings held on Tuesday the 23rd of March and Tuesday the 30th of March 2021 be confirmed. Moved Councillor Sypek, seconded Councillor Tyson. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 5, declarations of conflicts of interest. And councillors, does any councillor have a conflict of interest on any item on the agenda this evening? There being none, we move to item 6, presentations. And councillors, do we have any presentations this evening? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make a verbal presentation that on the 25th of March we hosted the Greek community of Moonee Valley for a flag raising ceremony to celebrate 200 years of independence and freedom from the Ottoman Empire. It was a really fantastic event. We've received a letter of thanks from the very Reverend Stylianopoulos, who thanks us for hosting. Once again, such an amazing thing to be a part of. Due to COVID restrictions, the planned march at the shrine had to be cancelled, so people might remember it was moved as an item of urgent business to accommodate that ceremony, and really pleased that we were able to do that. It was a great vibe on the day.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hodgson, and thank you for officiating at that event. Councillors, do we have any other presentations this evening? There being none, we now move to item 7, petitions and joint letters. And councillors, we have one petition being tabled tonight titled Reduction in Speed Limit in Woodland Street, Essendon. Councillor Adams, do you have a motion?
Yes, I do. Thanks, Mayor. A petition has been received with 10 signatures requesting council implement a reduction in the speed limit in Woodland Street, Essendon to 40 kilometres per hour. My recommendation is that council resolves to receive and note the petition regarding the reduction in speed limit in Woodland Street, Essendon to 40 kilometres per hour. B, refer this matter to the Director of Service Delivery for investigation and reporting back to council. And C, advise the petition organiser accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Do I have a seconder to receive that petition? Councillor Tyson. Put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Item 8 on the agenda is public question time, and we have received 15 questions from members of the community for tonight's meeting. As we do not have residents in the public gallery, I propose that we move to suspend the provisions in our governance rules requiring questioners to be present in the gallery. That will enable me to read the questions that have been submitted in advance and for the CEO to read the responses. So councillors, may I please have a mover that council resolves to temporarily suspend the public question provisions in its governance rules to allow questions from the gallery to be read by the Mayor and responses to be read out by the CEO. Moved Councillor Sypek, seconded Councillor Tyson. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour, and that's carried unanimously. So the first question is from Hayley Coote, who asks, I would like to ask the councillors to review the number of planning applications submitted and executed in Monash Street over the past 2 years. I would like them to compare the number of objections submitted by local residents for all these renovations versus the 17 plus objections they have received for this extension. This would clearly indicate that the local residents highly object to this bulky, oversized design sitting outside of the heritage scheme, even though it may fit within the building envelope. I'll pass to our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Hayley. Through the Mayor, all planning permit applications are assessed on the merit and against the relevant clauses, policy documents, and decision guidelines of the Moonee Valley Planning Scheme. Consequently, the level of popularity of any planning permit application with the community is not a valid consideration when the planning department assesses and formulates its decision on an application. Notwithstanding this, officers have undertaken a comparison of all approved and current planning permit applications and the number of objections received, and provided this to the councillors for the information. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The second question also comes from Hayley Coote, and the question reads, the 17 objections submitted by local residents have chosen to purchase homes in Monash Street due to the character of the neighbourhood and its heritage listing. When purchasing a home, buyers are fully aware of heritage overlays and the restrictions that apply. They select heritage streets for this reason, and if you review all of the buildings in this entire street, you will clearly see the considered approach that has been taken to date. If these plans are approved, it is in direct contrast to all other renovations and improvements that have taken place. We welcome contemporary design, however, these should not dominate the streetscape. Will councillors take the time to visit the street and see for themselves? Again, I'll pass to our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Hayley. Through the Mayor, the comments received in the first part of your question are noted. Regarding councillors visiting sites, councillors, as part of the preparation for council meetings, in addition to reading the reports, speaking to the applicants and objectors, and having past knowledge of the wards, sometimes do conduct site visits to further the understanding of applications put to them to make decisions on. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next question comes from Auntie Stipich, and the question reads, could Moonee Valley Council please undertake a traffic management study at the entrance to Strathnaver Reserve Pavilion on Mascoma Street, Strathmore, to address the inadequate car parking space that is dangerous and unsafe, especially during midweek training nights and weekend match days, to determine feasibility and options for additional car park, including extending the existing Strathnaver Reserve Strathmore car park. I'll again pass to our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Through the Mayor, thank you, Auntie, for your question relating to parking availability and associated road safety concerns at Strathnaver Reserve Pavilion on Mascoma Street, Strathmore. Council officers are aware that a parking assessment was undertaken in early 2016 to assess potential car parking improvements for Strathnaver Reserve in line with the approved master plan, with some works completed in November 2019. Due to the length of time passed since the last assessment and the additional concerns raised relating to public safety, it's prudent to reassess the situation and report back to Council on what further options are available. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next two questions come from Logan Shield. Logan's first question reads, the MV 2040 Action Plan, Green, contains 154 items that plan for a low-carbon, green, cool, low-waste and climate-adapted city. Of those 154 actions, only 17 are specific climate mitigation measures that plan to reduce community-wide greenhouse gas emissions in order to prevent worsening climate change. The majority of actions and potential costs to council are either climate adaptation, i.e. adapting to worsening impacts without preventing them, or have no measurable emissions reductions outcome. Has there ever been a council resolution, strategy, community consultation outcome, or relevant legislation that has led to focusing more heavily on climate adaptation measures rather than trying to prevent worsening climate change by reducing emissions as a first priority? I'll again pass to our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Logan. Through the Mayor, There has not been a council resolution to prioritise climate adaptation measures over mitigation measures. Council has long been committed to creating a more sustainable city, a city that's energy efficient, water sensitive, and with a community that is supported to use natural resources wisely. Through MV 2040, we are balancing both climate adaptation and mitigation measures, which are both critical factors to help prevent and address the impacts of climate change, which are already being felt in Moonee Valley with increased frequency and severity of heat waves, floods, and droughts, poor air conditioning, poor air quality, and impacts on human and wildlife health. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Logan's second question reads, the Community Engagement Framework notes climate change as an example where deliberative engagement is the relevant method. In this context, does the term climate change refer to climate mitigation, i.e. prevention, climate adaptation, or both? Would it not be more appropriate to split climate change into two categories of mitigation and adaptation, where mitigation falls under the participatory engagement method and adaptation under the deliberative method? I'll pass to our CEO, Helen Sweet, to respond.
Thank you, Logan. Through the Mayor. The term climate change refers to both climate mitigation and adaptation. In the context of the community engagement framework, climate change was used as an example of an overarching theme or complex topic that deliberative engagement can be used to engage with the community on. It's not prescriptive and meant to give insights into the types of topics that could be explored in a more in-depth manner with the community. Come up with ideas, help solve a problem, or assist in developing a project or plan. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next 10 questions will relate to agenda item 10.1, Amendment C 207 Moon, Impact to 2040, Moonee Ponds Activity Centre Local Plan. This question comes from Claire Borg, who asks Council, why is Council not adopting the recommendations of the independent panel hearing and refusing to issue a review of the Moonee Valley C 207 Moon panel report, open brackets, so-called confidential, close brackets, when the amendment and hearing were public? I'll pass to the CEO, Helen Sweet, to respond.
Thank you, Claire. Through the Mayor. Council is adopting some but not all recommendations of the independent planning panel for the reasons outlined in the Council report. Council is permitted to do this under the Planning and Environment Act 1987. The reasons why Council planning officers have recommended a particular course of action are public in the Council report and Attachment 1. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next question comes from Salvatore Vidiello, who asks, why hasn't Council looked to take up the recommendations as proposed by the panel hearing, namely to engage in a dialogue to create a master plan, just like what was undertaken with the Moonee Valley Racecourse development, which is part of the Moonee Ponds Activity Centre? I'll pass to our CEO, Helen Sweet, to respond.
Thank you, Salvatore. Through the Mayor. At the Amendment C 207 Moon panel hearing, the Mervac and Moonee group submitted that comprehensive master planning should be allowed for the sites to achieve additional floor area, public benefits, and realization of the activity centre. As Council responded at the hearing, it would be premature to suggest a master planning approach is appropriate or necessary, as there is no demonstration that an alternative urban design outcome is desirable or can be accommodated. Amendment C 207 Moon does not prohibit future master planning should a owner or conglomerate wish to do so within the bounds of the planning controls. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next question comes from Justin Kerwin. Justin's question reads, Why hasn't Council looked to consult with stakeholders on the planning amendment C207 Moon before making a decision as laid out in the recommendation by the Statutory Planning Officer's recommendation to Council without any input from the community or commercial stakeholders within the Moonee Ponds Activity Centre? Again, I'll pass to our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Justin. Through the Mayor, consultation with the stakeholders occurred in April to May 2019, 3 weeks of informal consultation, and in May to July 2020, 5 weeks of public exhibition. And there was a further opportunity for interested stakeholders to be heard during the panel hearing held in October 2020. Input from the community and commercial stakeholders provided through those consultation processes and the panel hearing, alongside expert analysis, shaped the recommendations by council officers. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next question this evening comes from Susan Loscievo. Susan's question reads, why won't Council consider deferring decisions re the amendment C207 Moon and engage/consult with stakeholders over a period of 90 days to better understand the position of those parties affected by the amendment? I'll again pass to our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Susan. Through the Mayor, please refer to the answer provided above to the previous questions. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next two questions come from Benjamin Conlon. Benjamin's first question reads, during the panel hearing process, several of the major landholders expressed their strong desire to work closely with Council's strategic planners to adopt a master plan approach to encourage integrated planning for their sites and neighbouring properties. Indeed, it was the view of the expert urban designer, Mr. Tim Biles, that, quote, the potential for viable redevelopment of the Mirvac sites and the delivery of public benefits would be better explored through a master planning process undertaken by the landowner in collaboration with Council. The mandatory FAR appears to foreclose this opportunity, close quotes. Is the Council aware of this offer made by the submitters, and if so, do they know whether any of the major landholders have been contacted since the panel report's release? I'll pass to our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Benjamin. Through the Mayor, Amendment C207 Moon does not prohibit master planning should an owner or conglomerate wish to do so within the bounds of the planning controls. Once the Minister has decided upon C207 Moon, Council's strategic planners will be available to work with major landholders about the specific development proposals. Major landholders have not been contacted beyond the broad open consultation process afforded to all submitters. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Benjamin's second question reads, Item 10.1, Attachment 2, Review of Moonee Valley C207 Moon Panel Report, has not been provided. This document would appear to be critical in the decision of which panel recommendations are proposed to be accepted or rejected. So that key stakeholders are fully informed of Council's position on these matters, will Council make this document available? I'll pass to our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Benjamin. Through the Mayor, the document will not be made available as is considered to be confidential information under Section 3.1 of the Local Government Act 2020 because it is 1. Land-use planning information, being information that if prematurely released is likely to encourage speculation in land values, Section 3.1c. And second dot point, legal privileged information, being information to which legal professional privilege applies, Section 3.1e. The reasons why Council planning officers have recommended a particular course of action are public in the Council report and Attachment 1. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next two questions have been submitted by Simon Martin. Simon's first question of Council is, all aspects of the FAR, floor area ratio, were thoroughly scrutinised and tested by all parties and their specialists throughout the 5-day panel hearing. including a broad range of development scenarios and in-depth analysis of the FAR's implications, with the 3 experienced panel members ultimately determining that the FAR was impactable, maybe impractical, but it says impactable and unnecessary. The officer's report only provides a cursory response to this complex aspect of the MPAC amendment, which will have far-reach implications if it is approved in its proposed form. Will the councillors agree to make available the council's more detailed review of the Moonee Pond C207 Moon Panel Report, Attachment 2, to enable all submitters a clearer understanding of the reasons why it is recommends disregarding the findings of the expert panel members? I'll again pass to our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Simon. Through the Mayor, please refer to the answer provided to the previous question. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Simon's second question reads, the planning officer states at para 311 of her report that, quote, the extensive submissions made during the hearing demonstrate the purpose of the FAR, floor area ratio, and why the mandatory FAR is required as part of the built form controls, close quote. Although we agree that the FAR was the subject of extensive debate, analysis and review throughout the panel hearing, the officer's statement fails to acknowledge that there was considerable discussion regarding alternative means of achieving a suitable built form outcome other than a mandatory tool such as FAR. Would the councillors agree that the introduction of an extensive suite of clearly expressed height limits, street wall heights, upper level setbacks, policy directives and design outcomes, open brackets, none of which exist in the current activities centre zone, close brackets, could provide the necessary tools for your statutory planners to achieve the vision contained in the MV 2040 strategy? I'll pass to our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Simon. Through the Mayor, Council officers agree that an extensive suite of tailored planning controls is required. The Council officers' perspective is that the proposed suite of planning controls should include a mandatory floor area ratio, which will deliver better design outcomes than clearly expressed hard limits or a discretionary set of hard limits, which has previously been in place. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The final 2 questions for this evening come from Damien Maloney. Damien's first question reads, Attachment 1 of the officer's report, the planning officer seeks to use the Hall Street development, 34 stories, to justify what may happen with larger sites should the mandatory FAR be removed. However, are councillors aware that this development was the result of a ministerial call-in and, as such, was not subjected to the typical checks and balances applied to other development proposals within the MPAC? I'll pass to our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Damien. Through the Mayor, Council is aware that the Hall Street development was called in by the Minister. That scenario aptly demonstrates the requirement for an amendment to the planning scheme to ensure that comprehensive planning controls are in place. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. Damien's second question reads, since the release of the panel members' findings, has the Council's strategic planners further investigated other means of encouraging the provision of social housing in new developments within the MPAC without having to rely on a discretionary affordable housing uplift, AHU, as a primary method of achieving this outcome? Furthermore, would it not be prudent to wait until the Minister of Planning releases the Ministerial Advisory Committee's report on planning mechanisms for affordable housing, which will provide a statewide approach to identifying funding models and planning mechanisms to facilitate the supply of affordable housing? I'll again pass to our CEO, Helen Swee, to respond.
Thank you, Damien. Through the Mayor, Amendment C207 Moon includes a proposed opt-in mechanism to facilitate the delivery of affordable housing. As the amendment is at the final stages of consideration, it is not considered appropriate to investigate other means of achieving this through this amendment at this late stage. The state government expects expects Council to finalise the planning scheme amendment process in a timely manner after receiving the panel report. Amendment C207 Moonee itself does not prevent the Council from implementing outcomes determined by the Minister in response to the Ministerial Advisory Committee's Affordable Housing Report. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO. The next item on the agenda is item 9, reports from delegated committees, and we have none for tonight, so we'll move to council reports. Item 10.1 is Amendment C207 Moon, Impact to 2040, Moonee Ponds Activity Centre Local Plan. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation with 2 additional points. Point I that reads, instruct the Mayor to write to the Minister for Planning and the local member for Essendon to affirm Council's position on the need for mandatory controls for built form and height to give certainty about future appropriate development in the Moonee Ponds Activity Centre, and referencing the role of Moonee Ponds in the Minister's Activity Centre pilot program. And point J, note that any changes to traffic flow direction in the Moonee Ponds Activity Centre will be subject to detailed traffic studies, appropriate stakeholder and community consultation, and future council resolutions.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. Look, there's really so much to talk about in this suite of documents. There's a whole lot of work that has gone into them, and it's a very exciting package which sets out a vision for what will become the CBD of Moonee Valley. It's a really strong vision for the precinct, and it contains so much planning, consultation and attention to detail that I'm sure I won't be able to do justice to it in my allotted time, but I want to congratulate our council on all of the hard work done to get us to this point. I'm just going to focus on a key issue, being the decision of the independent panel and the officer's recommendation to submit our planning scheme amendment to the Minister for Planning, including the mandatory floor area ratios and affordable housing floor area uplift. So it's recognised that the Moonee Ponds Activity Centre will see significant growth and interest from developers in the coming years, given its proximity to the city and its well-serviced public transport connections. We've seen that there's inappropriate development that has occurred in Moonee Ponds, and we really have to take steps to regain control so that we can plan for the future of our city and plan for that growth while still protecting amenity of our citizens. There's really, as I said, a huge amount of work that's gone into the process from council staff, from councillors, residents, business owners, and all of the members of community who have taken time to participate in consultation and, as we've heard, submit their questions tonight. They've gone through those engagement processes that have been running for 4 years now. Through a combination of the mandatory floor area ratios and discretionary building heights and setbacks, the amendment provides for development with flexibility for built form and within an appropriate scale. But unfortunately, the panel findings didn't support that strong strategic argument put forward by council for floor area ratios, which consider the planning practice notes and seek to manage development within the activity centre without creating just a condensed block of towers without visual interest and design creativity, responsive design. So mandatory floor area ratios form a really critical relationship with the other discretionary built form controls, which together achieve the built form objectives of the amendment. In addition, the affordable housing uplift proposal is aimed at achieving our vision for our city by addressing the housing crisis that we face in Victoria and contribute to diversity of housing stock in Moonee Valley. It's a really important aspect of the proposal in achieving a fair and thriving Moonee Valley. So Council is putting its case to the Minister for Planning to seek his support for the innovative solution that we have come up with that to address the issue that faces us in the future of the Moonee Ponds Activity Centre. The Minister chose Moonee Valley to be involved in the Activity Centre pilot project to address the issue of height controls, given the precedent that was set by the large residential towers in Moonee Ponds. And I consider that it would be ridiculous if we got this far along the journey and we end up with a watered down planning scheme amendment that doesn't address this key question of mandatory built form controls relating to height. It's probably the single biggest issue that stood out during the election campaign our city's growing and it's going to continue to grow, and our residents are united in their concern for this future growth and ensuring that we can manage it appropriately. So I've suggested these additional amendments just to make sure that we are putting the strongest foot forward to the Minister to consider Council's position on this. Without mandatory controls, we will be impotent as a council in managing our future growth in Moonee Ponds. We really must seek this amendment, and I urge councillors to support the officer's recommendation in making this submission to the Minister for Planning.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Bedio, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have much more to add on Councillor Hodgson's comments, other than to also commend our officers for such a great result in compiling this amendment. It was 4 years in the making and a lot of work, and it's something that I'm proud to support. I also want to note that I understand the significant concerns of the community, particularly around the flow of traffic in the centre, discussions around one-way roads and the like. My understanding after discussions with officers is that any changes to traffic flow will need to come before council again for ratification, if that is the case. And so nothing put through with this amendment will necessarily mean that the traffic flow around the centre will need to change as a result of its implementation. I also echo Councillor Hodgson's comments in relation to the floor area ratio. I'm confident that its implementation will allow for a much more complex and diverse streetscape, less of a Lego block city. And I think it's an innovative approach to managing building heights. So again, commend the council officers for putting this together.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. I also want to reiterate Councillor Hodgson's thanks to the officers and previous council who've worked really hard on MPAC. It's taken, I think, close to 4 years. It's probably the whole of the last council term. I was just seeing if Councillor Byrne wished to speak, but I'm sure she's spoken to it enough over the past term, so I understand there has been a tremendous amount of work that's gone into it. So it is quite difficult for us as new councillors to come to this at the very 11th hour. And, I'm not entirely happy with all aspects of MPAC. There were things that if I had been around in the early stages, I perhaps would have liked to have shaped in different ways. But it's pretty impossible for councillors at this very last stage in a very protracted process and a statutorily enforced process to really inject any new thinking into it, which is somewhat frustrating. But it's sort of the reality of the rigorous process that's taken place. That said, there sort of are two elements, and thank you to Councillor Hodgson for moving those amendments, because they do go some way, and I think sufficient way for me to support the motion to address my some of my concerns. And obviously the traffic flow has been quite a contested issue. And one of the reasons I think it might be quite contested is that in my efforts to try to find the data and the modelling and the information behind the decisions made around the traffic flow, I haven't been able to find anything. And I think it would be, it would certainly help me at this point to have that information available, and it doesn't seem to be part of the suite of the 15 attachments. So it gives me a great deal of comfort to include that point J, and we've had some good discussions with officers and sought advice about what's best to do around that traffic flow, and it is really important to note that those arrows in the document are not prescriptive. They would, in order to be implemented, they would require all of that modelling and data and the work to find out whether that would work. I actually, the arrows along Puckle Street, putting aside the question about whether Puckle Street should or not be one way, the arrows to me, in fact, perhaps should go the other way. So I'm somewhat reassured to know that there would need to be considerable more work to be done before council was to implement any changes to the traffic flow. And I would also like to, just in my last few seconds, Mayor, reiterate the need for us to write to the Planning Minister to reaffirm that although the panel didn't like the approach... Could I just finish this one sentence, please, Mayor? Thank you. Although the panel didn't like our approach that we're taking, it is an approach that is supported by the pilot program, and without some mandatory controls, the Minister will leave us where we were in 2017, and that's just an unreasonable place to put this council in.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. Just quickly, noting all the work that has gone on to date regarding this planned scheme and I think I'll note the number of questions posed tonight by community members. For me, I'd like to see a bit more conversation with the people that are actually affected by the FAR process. I'm certainly not an expert by any stretch of the imagination, and I think that if obviously we're hearing that there are still concerns, and I personally would like to focus on learning more about those concerns, considering they don't affect me personally, but want to hear from those people that it does affect, that do affect. So as it stands, I cannot support this amendment because I feel we need to, or me personally, I would like to have more consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, Councillor Hodgson, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mayor. Just picking up on a point from Councillor Isa, just to note that yes, this suite of documents does set a really bold vision for our city, and obviously there's a lot of work ahead of council to put it into practice. Not only the traffic flow, but all of the bold changes that the amendment suggests could be possible. We'll go through our strong community engagement process, as well as all of the appropriate expert advice that we will seek through officers' hard work to implement that. In response to Councillor Sharp's concerns, I note that yes, we did receive some further communication from objectors to the planning amendment who I would note had opportunity to present their case to council. It has been well known through the 4 years of work, including speaking at the panel, so they provided their evidence at the panel. So council has heard on several occasions from those objectors, including in question time tonight. So I do consider that there has been opportunity for them to present their views, and that their views have been considered in council forming this position.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. I'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Nation, Councillor Isa, Councillor Tyson. Those against? Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek. The motion is carried. Item 10.2 on the agenda is electric vehicle charging in Moonee Valley. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
Mayor, I'd like to move to defer this motion to the meeting of April the, I apologise, I can't add 14 to 13, 27.
Motion to defer. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Isa, you can, but only speak to the purpose of deferring, not to the content of any report, I guess.
Mayor, thank you. I just wanted to explain the reason for deferral, and it's partly because there is an electric vehicle festival in St Leonard's Road in Ascot Vale on Saturday, and I know that many people around the table, many councillors are going to be attending that, and we thought that it was perhaps a good opportunity to talk to some community members who are really engaged in electric vehicle infrastructure and pushing for council and state government and federal government to fund more infrastructure locally, and we'd really like to talk to people who have been working on that in the community before finalising the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Bedio, do you wish to speak to the deferral? Does any other councillor wish to speak? If not, I'll put it to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Report 10.3 is response to notice of motion 2020/23. BMX mountain bike facilities in Moonee Valley. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Adams.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to move an alternative motion that Council resolves to note the completion of a BMX and MTB opportunities report, attachment 1, and the results of the Your Say community engagement report, attachment 3. B, respond to the lead petitioner requesting a mountain bike track in Moonee Valley about the completion of a council investigation, attachment 2. C, refer the 2021-22 budgeting process, the allocation of funding that is operational budget for a mountain bike program to provide greater detail on the feasibility of the sites identified in the operations report, attachment 1, and further community engagement, prioritising Aberfeldy Park, Northern Hillside Embankment for immediate investigation, and refer this to the 2021-22 budgeting process as required. D, refer to the 2021-22 budgeting process, the allocation of funds for a new pump track to be designed and constructed at Montgomery Park, consistent with the endorsed master plan, as well as an upgrade to Fanny Street Reserve permanent BMX dirt track, taking into consideration ideas provided by community members. E, consult with the Nidri business owners about putting a temporary pump track behind Wallace Mall to help the shopping precinct post-COVID. F, note the management responses to existing tracks and jumps, including progressing the removal of identified unauthorised high-risk jumps immediately and any further modifications. G, allow lower-risk jumps and tracks to remain on a temporary basis until alternative council-supported jumps and tracks are developed in the municipality. Note that once alternative facilities are in place, council will work with stakeholders to remediate and restore affected sites. H, retain Aberfeldy Park jumps as a designated site for building tracks and jumps on a temporary basis until alternative council-supported jumps and tracks are developed in the municipality, subject to regular monitoring and collaboration with users to keep the site safe. I, receive a report on all completed and endorsed master plans that include full or half courts, hit-up walls and public fitness equipment for recreational and community use, with timeframes for full completion subject to funding. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Isa. Councillor Adams, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. During COVID lockdowns, a significant spike in unplanned community-created BMX and mountain bike MTB tracks occurred throughout numerous parks and open space reserves in Moonee Valley. The unplanned tracks have created issues in terms of risk to users and damage to conservation and cultural heritage sites where the value of these sites may not have been entirely known by the community. Conversely, they have provided an opportunity for people to engage in physical activity and social interaction in the outdoors close to home, particularly when many other sport and recreation opportunities were not available and the city endured extended lockdowns impacting the mental health of our youth. It was evident during COVID lockdown the lack of public recreation facilities for our preteens and teens, and it is why Council initiated the Young People Outdoors Your Say survey to identify activities and locations required for further investigation. I don't have enough allocated time to go into the findings of this report. However, I urge anybody watching to go onto the Moonee Valley website and read the report findings, as it is an interesting read and has been essential to inform this motion, the BMX and MTB Opportunities Report, which is also on the website, that was prepared in response to a notice of motion on the 8th of December 2020. As the desire to continue using these facilities remains, we do want to allow the use of the lower risk jumps in the interim while we progress these new spaces as quickly as possible at sites such as Montgomery Park, where consultation has previously taken place, and at Fanny Street Reserve, where there is capacity to enhance the facility to suit broader age groups. The northern embankment at Aberfeldy Park has also been identified as a location to prioritise further investigations, and I'd like to see this happen as soon as possible. Once we have further progress on the new facilities, we want to work closely with any impacted community groups to restore any affected sites. In support of the community feedback received through this consultation in relation to half courts, hit-up walls and fitness equipment, I've also included a resolution to receive a report on all endorsed master plans that may provide for these activities in the future, along with anticipated timeframes for completion subject to funding. Thank you to our officers for taking the time to prepare this, and the feedback I have received from our community is that the report represents and addresses both sides, those for and against bike tracks and jumps. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Adams. Councillor Isa, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Just to thank all of the over 300 community members who responded to the survey, and the nearly 600 people who downloaded the information and really engaged in the process that was initiated by Council last year. Getting that sort of engagement and feedback is exactly how we want to be collecting information about issues like this, and the report that's then put all that information together is a really balanced read that sets out all of the issues and looks at the possible solutions and the sites. And it's for anyone who hasn't had a look at it, it really does summarise where the key spots are that people have been using jumps, and the different types of jumps that have been that kids have engaged with, and what kids are telling us they would like us to do. So I really do support the suggestions being put forward as to what we do next, trying to do a couple of different things to improve Fanny Reserve, which it needs, let's be frank, to put in some of the modular jumps that are of a particular style for some people, and then to take some steps to really initiate something a little bit more adventurous for our older kids who've shown us how creative and highly skilled and fearless they are. So really happy to be putting this forward, and also very happy that there's some budgetary processes associated with it, so it's not just something that we're pushing further out into some future budget. So I hope everybody who has also expressed some concerns about bike jumps is also feeling or knows that Council is responding to those concerns and does want to work with young people to remediate sites where there has been some damage, and I look forward to getting out and getting muddy and doing that as well.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thank you, Mayor. It's been quite a while since it was in between COVID lockdowns when I went down with local resident Michael Gallis to meet with quite a number of jumpers, of bike riders, in which they presented me as mayor at the time with a petition, of which then you then presented in Councillor Nation, because they all knew you very well, not through bike racing but or bike jumps, but through your role as their previous swim coaches. And that was, well, 10 months ago or so now. So it is so exciting to finally get to this position. So I'd like to thank all of the kids that from back then, and also that's put into this report. And obviously you for presenting the petition so many months ago. 1 second, talking about kids. So a couple of things that I wanted to touch on was the easy wins. We've done some work on master plans before. Sorry. Got an extra in the chamber today who's just not behaving herself right at this second. Some easy wins. So we've done all this work on master plans, and what we see is that we spend so much time consulting the community, but then never actually getting to the point where we deliver everything on the master plan, and we're getting better at it. But Montgomery Park, as Councillor Adams has brought up, is a prime example of we've endorsed to have a little pump track there, and then it just sits there in the master plan. And we may do it, we may not do it. And so it's really good. Well done, Councillor Adams, for bringing this up, because finally I think we've had something that the community is really excited about. And then we get this report back and we go, you know what? We've gone out there, let's do it. There still needs to be a bit of design work done, but it's really exciting. And I think that the final point, which is to receive a report on completed endorsed master plans with half courts, will really, half court hit-up walls and public fitness equipment for recreational and community use will really excite a lot of people in the community as well, because there's a lot of people, particularly the basketball community, that have seen all these half courts come into master plans and then never come into fruition. So it's good to, will be good to have a report back on that. So I actually see them as easy wins, that we're halfway there, let's just complete the process. The other bit that I would like to touch on was point E, which was consult with the Niddrie business owners about putting a temporary pump track in behind Wallace Mall. So the report was one of the best reports that I've read from council officers. I thought that it was really good and really detailed. But the one thing that probably wasn't in there as much, because it wasn't necessarily brought up, was how we could possibly link in the bike usage with our business precincts. And one of the reasons, it obviously didn't come up in the consultation in the hotspots.
Byrne, just noting your time's expired.
30 seconds. Sorry,
no,
Mayor.
No problems.
She took up 30 seconds of my time.
Fair point.
A lot of the hotspots were along the rail corridors or along the waterways, and there probably hasn't been that much bad, not bad, but I can't think of the word, but the behaviour of bikes around our, unauthorised, unstructured, good activity around our business precincts, because there's not necessarily that many places to go. But how exciting would it be to have a little pump track around one of our business precincts, because I can just see so many pros. I'm interested to hear what the business traders, the Niddrie traders have to say about this. Sorry, just 2 seconds. Because Wallace Mall, whilst it's our standard council, let's do everything at Wallace Mall, I think that is great. But I can also really imagine the car park next to the kebab shop on the corner of Matthews Avenue and Keeler Road, having a little place to ride your bikes. You've got the toilets right there, and I could really imagine watching my kids play around on that whilst eating kebab. But that's another story. The Niddrie traders will know more about that, and I'm looking forward to hearing what they have to say. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, Councillor Adams, would you like to close? We'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 10.4 on tonight's agenda is response to notice of motion 2020/31, installation of solar panels on council-owned buildings. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
Mayor, I'd like to move the recommendation with some amendments. For ease, I might just read the whole motion if that's okay. The motion is A, note the recommended staged actions and the report in attachment 1 analysing council-owned buildings that are deemed suitable for rooftop solar photovoltaic systems. B, prior to taking further action, request the Chief Executive Officer to commission a report providing an evidence-based analysis of the environmental and financial effectiveness of actions Council could undertake to reduce community carbon emissions in line with Council's community emissions reduction target in MV 2040 and the interim carbon emissions reduction targets for the community adopted by Council on 8th of September 2020. And C, consider a future report on the outcomes of the analysis in point B to inform further action from this report and related action plans.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to your motion?
Thanks very much, Mayor. In putting forward the notice of motion a while ago, it was an idea that is in the Green Action Plan to install solar panels on community buildings, and so the idea of putting forward the notice of motion was to progress that. When the reports come back, and I do thank officers for compiling all of that information, it's a terrific database now and an excellent audit of the rooftops, our community building rooftops, and which ones have solar panels and which don't, and which ones are potential could potentially have solar panels in the future. So thank you so much for putting together that document. The report, however, highlights making some decisions about which ones to put solar panels on, and it highlights that we as an organisation perhaps don't have some of the essential knowledge that we need to know how best to spend our ratepayers' money in terms of reducing emissions. So the report notes that solar power is one way of reducing emissions, also considers a range of other retrofit or energy efficiency measures. And in sort of drilling down into that, or in talking with officers, it really is apparent that we're missing this key piece of information as an organisation that gives us a clear picture of what is best value for money in reduction of our community emissions. We've now got some really great targets for reducing community emissions, 44% by 2025 and 67% by 2030. And then if you add offsets to that, we're almost pretty much getting to net zero by 2030, which has been a hot topic in some emails we've been receiving. So it's pretty exciting that we've got those targets, but we don't really have the evidence-based data that we need to know what actions to implement to best go about reaching those targets. And so instead of moving the officer's recommendation, I'm putting forward an alternative that takes a step to the side to get that information to really give us surety about what's best to do next. And I'm really looking forward to this piece of work coming back, handing it over to the CEO and hoping that the information that I'm hoping for does come back to us as council and gives us a really good picture about what actions we can do to reach our targets. And at the moment we've got 1.2 million tonnes of carbon going. That's 2019, so it's probably more than that now. We need to bring that down. Looking forward to working out how. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor. And thank you, Councillor Isa, for your original notice of motion and this current motion. I'd like to also reiterate my thanks to the officers for their investigation in response to the notice of motion and their original recommendations. I hope that we will be back soon ready to endorse those recommendations, but with the solid evidence base that underpins that to support that decision. As Councillor Isa suggested, that's the most efficient way that we're going to meet our reduction targets, is to know exactly where the bang for buck is. So happy to support this approach, and yes, hope that look forward to implementing the steps of the report that comes back.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, Councillor Isa, would you like to close? Put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 10.5 is response to petition about parking in Elizabeth Street, Moonee Ponds. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa? Thank you.
Microphone even.
Do I have a seconder? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. The issue predates us as councillors. A petition was brought to council last year by some residents in Elizabeth Street, Moonee Ponds, but I did visit Elizabeth Street yesterday evening and had a chat with some of the residents there to understand the issue, and it does seem as though there has been, because of the clearways and because of some issues locally with respect to some businesses, a bit of congestion in parking around their particular end of Elizabeth Street. But the officers have done some good analysis of the situation, and in talking with the residents, it does sound as though that point B about continuing to enforce the existing parking restrictions may go some way to helping solve the problem. It seems as though there may be some parking that's going on there outside of the permit zone, which kicks in at 5:30, and overstaying the 2 hours that are currently in place. So I'm hopeful that with some further enforcement, that can perhaps be alleviated, and I have suggested to the residents that if problems do continue in that, even with that measure, that they make some further contact and we think a bit creatively about how we might be able to help.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Bedio, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Not much further to add other than I believe this issue could potentially be dealt with, as Councillor Isa said, by further enforcement of the area. From reading the report, the parking assessment found that it didn't meet the threshold to amend the permitted hours or the parking permitted times. And in this instance, you know, it'd be good to follow council process in that, not to make any amendments to the parking times at this point. So,
thank you, Councillor Bedio. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, Councillor Isa, would you like to close? We'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 10.6 is response to notice of motion 2020/02. Size options for green waste bins. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Sypek.
Yes, happy to move the officer's recommendation there.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Sypek, do you wish to speak to the motion?
Yes, Mayor. This is a very simple motion that's basically, this will allow every household in Moonee Valley to have a green waste bin, whether it's a 240 or a 120. Even small places have food waste, and this will be a great way of recycling that food waste. And you know, that small little bit of patch of grass in the backyard of an apartment complex or a unit complex. It's as simple as that, Mr. Mayor. It's just allowing every household in Moonee Valley to have a green waste bin.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Councillor Hodgson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. A little phrase is rattling around in my head of a city that rethinks waste. So I think that this is a great step along the pathway to us achieving our MV 2040 vision.
Thanks, Councillor Hodgson. Any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Isa.
Oh, just to say, it was a terrific motion when it came, and so thanks, Councillor Sypek, for bringing that. I think it was last year or the year before even, and it's particularly in Moonee ward where we do have a lot of smaller homes. It's a terrific initiative to bring in the smaller waste bin. I am hopeful too that at some stage we can look at the compostable bags that then make it easier for people to put food into the green bins, because many people don't like to put in the compost. Over in the heat, it can sit there and can get a bit yucky. And some municipalities are using particular biodegradable bags to make it easier and to give that incentive, to increase that incentive for people to continue to divert food waste from landfill, and to continue to help push that into this process. So perhaps that's something we can look at some stage.
Thanks, Councillor Isa. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? If not, Councillor Sypek, would you like to close?
Yeah, thank you, Mr Mayor. That's a great idea, Councillor Isa, with the compostable waste bags, and I look forward to seeing that probably come to fruition as well. But just to probably help you out, even before I got on council, the council prior to me introduced these green waste bins, and they're called aerated green waste bins, and that allowed the compost to still breathe and not sort of cause nasty smells. So hopefully these smaller bins will have the same filtration system as some of the ones that we've got right now. But if we can get some bags as well on top of that, why not? We're a recycle council, this one.
Thanks, Councillor Sypek. We'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? That's carried unanimously. Item 10.7 on the agenda is Councillor Gift Policy. Councillors, do I have a motion? Councillor Isa.
Sure, Mayor, I will move the officer's recommendation.
Councillor Isa, do I have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Bedio. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
I'd like to thank the officers for their diligence in putting together the new gift policy. It does have some more rigorous elements to it for councillors and for officers too. I guess I was only really concentrating on the requirements for councillors. But it does also, I think, it really provides some greater clarity to councillors around what we ought to do when particular value gifts are presented to us, and how we go about declaring those. And I think that greater clarity is really, really useful. Often people offer us a cup of coffee or some chocolates or a bottle of wine, and it's really important for us as councillors to know exactly how to respond to those offers, and for that to be set out really clearly so that people also who are making these offers don't think us ungrateful or rude if we decline and pay for our own coffee and decline the gift of wine or chocolate. So hopefully this does help both councillors, officers and for community members as well to understand what expectations there are of us in terms of our being the recipients of gifts, and making sure that that's all documented. Of course, it goes to our code of conduct as councillors, our integrity and our conflict of interests, which are really important for people having confidence and trust in the integrity of our decision making.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Bedio, wish to speak to the motion?
Nothing further to add, Mayor. Very nicely summed up by Councillor Isa.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Isa, would you like to close?
No, thank you, Mayor.
Put that to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Item 10.8 on the agenda tonight is the realignment of Ormond Park playing surfaces. Councillors, do I have a motion?
Mayor, I'd like to move
Signal intent, and I'll give you the call. Councillor Isa.
Mayor, I'd like to move an alternative motion, please. Is it easiest if I read the whole?
I'd read the whole thing, yeah.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'd like to read a motion that reads, A, note the Ormond Park ground alignment option attachment 2 in order to satisfy the council resolution for fair and equitable access to both clubs for senior and junior competition. B, note that both tenant winter clubs do not support the proposed option in attachment 2. C, note the estimated cost of $280,000, excluding permanent lighting solutions, to implement the infrastructure recommendations of the Ormond Park ground alignment option. D, support the continuation of the current 2021 winter seasonal allocations awarded to clubs, with this to remain in place for 2021 winter season, and support operational actions required to address lighting safety concerns to the 3 grounds. E, consider the Essendon Royals Football Club proposal provided in attachment 4 as part of a municipal soccer strategy to be developed by council before summer ground allocation in 2021, in particular addressing the viability of longer seasonal allocations for soccer clubs. F, if it is determined through the soccer strategy that the Essendon Royals' needs cannot be met at Cross Keys, council commits to reconsidering the Royals' needs for the 2022 winter allocation. And G, request the CEO provide options for additional full-sized soccer pitches for the 2021 winter allocation to the Essendon Royals. No, H, sorry.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Hodgson. Councillor Isa, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thanks, Mayor. Look, I know that a lot of people have been very distressed and quite preoccupied by a lot of the difficulty of this decision, and I think it's probably fair to say that we'd prefer not to be in this position where an operational matter has made its way to the chamber and caused a great deal of distress.
Point of order, Mayor, please. Misleading comment, not an operational matter.
So, Councillor Sharp, if you're moving a point of order, you'll need to state what part of the governance rules.
Someone's taken my governance sheet away. My little
I
card, where's that
I
gone?
can only hear it if you're giving me a particular part of the governance rules. Otherwise, we'll just have to let Councillor Isa continue.
Okay, well, if you just wait for 1 minute while I get up my policies. Can I just ask as a point of clarification where our cards have gone, which have always been here?
So, as per the last meeting, the cards are actually out of date because they refer to previous governance rules.
Would it have been handy for governance to have provided us with up-to-date ones for tonight's meeting? I think it may well have been.
Noted. Dealing with the current point of order right now.
Yes, understanding. Point of order. Chair, Mayor, can I please request that governance direct me exactly where these are in this governance rules and election period policy?
I guess if you're moving a point of order, you just need to, it just states you need to state the point of order and the section, rule, paragraph or provision relevant to that point of order. So, sorry, Councillor Sharp, if you can't do that, I'll just let Councillor Isa continue.
I'm just trying to find the point of order, that's all. Is 57.9.4 is aimed at embarrassing a councillor or member of council staff.
So what's the section?
57.9.4.
The 57.9.4 relates to a question from the public, maybe disallowed by the chair if the chair determines it's aimed at embarrassing a councillor or a member of council
Apologies.
staff. I won't hear that point of order. Councillor Isa, if you could continue.
So I just want to go back to November 2019. There was a meeting that took place with, obviously I wasn't at that meeting, but it's documented in an email that was circulated in March 2020 to all councillors, that a meeting took place where there was discussion about realigning Ormond Park. In January 2020, there was a further meeting that took place with councillors and the tenants of Ormond Park. And in between...
Point of order, Mayor, please.
Point
The
of order,
councillor
Councillor
has
Sharp.
referred to councillors. Can I please request that someone direct me? I'm looking here in the governance rules. If a councillor can't even find a point of order request in the governance rules, please. The councillor has just made an allegation that a meeting was held with councillors. That's inferring on all of us that we were all involved, and it is incorrect. Simply.
Appreciate that, Councillor Sharp, but again, if there's not a set part of the rules you're pulling up in regards to the point of order, then I just have to let Councillor Isa continue.
Can someone just advise me where the point of orders are, please? I mean, we're sitting
Section-
around in a council meeting and we normally have these things to refer to, and they have been taken away and not provided for a very important meeting tonight.
So noted, as discussed with the point of orders at a previous meeting, our new governance rules actually have removed a lot of the a lot of the rules as to why you would call a point of order, and I made that reference when a point of order was called last meeting, that there's actually very few parts of our governance rules that enable you to call a point of order. And they only really deal with how the chair deals with a point of order. So I would suggest that our governance rules need updating because there's not rules in it relating to specific points of order.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'll just continue calling them if I feel that they statements are incorrect.
Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. Between January and March in 2020, there were various emails detailing the new arrangements for the alignment of Ormond Park. And in March of 2020, there were allocations for one pitch at Ormond Park to the Essendon Royals for a pitch that was measured somewhere between 44 and 49 metres, possibly around 47 metres, it's not clear. Of course, the season didn't take place in 2020, and so fast forward to January 2021 when the allocations went out, and in March 2021, on the 18th of March, there were signed allocations for one pitch at Ormond Park to be used by the Royals and 2 AFL grounds to be used by the Moonee Valley Football Club at Ormond Park. And this, we understand this did not meet the needs of the Royals, who have 700 members, and it's terrific that the Royals have so many women's teams and so many members. The footy club has 630 members, equally young teams and females. So what was an operational issue until March 2021 came to the chamber, and it has been a very difficult issue for all councillors to deal with, to try to magic up space for teams for whom there is just not enough space at Ormond Park. And look, I cannot fault Councillor Sharp for her hard work in supporting the Royals to try to find a resolution, and Councillor Sharp has been incredibly hard-working on this issue, as have other councillors. However, when the option put forward to try to meet the resolution was put forward to both clubs, we were told by both clubs that this did not suit them. And the request has changed, in fact, to include other things, such as a 65-metre pitch and a longer seasonal allocation. Now, that was not part of the initial scope of the motion, but in this amended proposal, I've put forward an acknowledgement of those requests and ways in which we might try to take those requests forward. But I need to be quite clear that my strong position is that council cannot acquiesce to every request that is made of by every one of our 30 clubs. We just can't do that. And we can't have 30 clubs coming to the chamber with requests for grounds that we just don't have, or for 42 or 45 week allocations of pavilions. We have to share. We also have the situation where the Royals are now denying the use of the lights at Moonee Valley Football Club at Ormond Park. The lights were turned off at 7 o'clock tonight when they finished training. We can't deal with these sorts of tactics where council is being, held over a barrel a bit to try to come up with things for one club, inconsistent to our policies, inconsistent with other clubs, through tactics such as turning off lights and not letting other people use council grounds. So we want to help all clubs, but we cannot meet every request, and we can't accept conduct that is harmful and unfair to the other clubs who are quietly.
Your time has expired.
I'll just finish this sentence if I may. Conduct that's unfair to every other club that's quietly helping their members play. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Councillor Hodgson, did you wish to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Isa. I reiterate your views that there's been a lot of hard work going into this. It's clearly a less than ideal scenario, and I'd just like to say to the clubs that have been involved, thank you for your participation as we try and seek a solution, which I would also reiterate Councillor Isa's point that we do hope that this operational matter, although it's come into chambers, we will be able to return it to operational. The recommended option, I note the option that officers came up with to meet the intent of the resolution is clearly not supported by either of the clubs. It's an expensive option, and I would certainly support looking at some other options, particularly those suggested by the Essendon Royals Football Club in their proposal, before we spend money down at Ormond Park to implement a solution which doesn't seem to address what has emerged as the key issue of requiring more senior grounds for soccer. I think we also, in looking at the next steps, reflected on what we've learnt through the process, and we've learnt that in order to achieve the best outcomes for our clubs, we need to have a fair process to follow. So I'm certainly committed tonight to making a decision that won't repeat any mistakes of the past and allows a fair and equitable process for future ground allocations. So in referring some of the further investigation to a municipal soccer strategy and further consideration of the Essendon Royals proposal, I hope that we'll be able to achieve that. Our current ground allocations processes, they're no longer meeting the needs of our clubs. I think that's become very apparent, and we need to take a fresh look at how we're accommodating sporting clubs in Moonee Valley. We have a few processes underway that are doing that, with the soccer strategy that was originally raised by Councillor Sharp in a notice of motion, the sports consultation project that we have. And I think that we really need to make sure that those processes are fully completed so that we can assess the changing needs for facilities and grounds, particularly of growing clubs like those that we see down at Ormond Park. So while I acknowledge that in moving this motion tonight, we're not fixing all of the problems that were brought to us originally, I'm confident that these can be considered through the fair processes that we have underway and are suggesting here, that allow all affected parties to be properly consulted on any changes that are proposed and ensure that all clubs receive fair and equitable treatment under any policy change.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this motion? Councillor Bedio.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to put forward a proposed amendment to the motion.
What is your amendment?
The amendment would be the deletion of all points in the motion from Part D. Sorry, let me get my bearings. The deletion of Part B. The deletion of Part D. And Part E, F, G, and H. To be replaced with a new section, Part D. Consider the club's feedback and proposals provided, attachments 3 and 4, as part of the pending municipal soccer strategy. Just making sure governance are you keeping up with this
Are
one?
you doing an amendment, or are you just foreshadowing for
An amendment.
You do it, okay.
Part E, consider the Essendon Royals Soccer Club proposal provided, attachment 4, as part of a development of a sporting field allocation policy to be developed by Council before summer grounds allocation in 2021, in particular addressing the viability of longer seasonal allocations for soccer clubs. Report to be provided to Council by August 15. Part F, if it is determined through the sporting field allocation policy that the Essendon Royals cannot access Cross Keys Reserve for more than 45 weeks per year, as is requested in their proposal, as mentioned in Part Part E of this resolution, Council commits to immediately recommencing discussions in relation to the Ormond Park ground realignment as per Part A of this resolution, prior to the commencement of the summer allocation. G, requests that the CEO assist the Essendon Royal Soccer Club to find an additional 65-metre soccer pitch to use for the remainder of the 2021 winter allocation.
Second that.
So, councillors, are we aware of what the amendment is, or do we need to wait for the screen to be updated? That is updated?
Yep.
Yes, we're aware of the amendment is. Ask for a seconder. Councillor Sharp. Councillor Bedio, do you wish to speak to the specific amendment?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I must say I do agree with many of the points raised by Councillor Isa, in the sense that Council can't be held over a barrel to influence a decision. But in this particular instance, I feel there is a real legitimate need from the Essendon Royals to support their club, to support their members. Now, my concern with pushing back until next year will be putting the Royals at a significant disadvantage for this season. I've spoken to the president of the Royals, and I feel they do need some reassurance that they will have options for their members. And I think that in doing this, we're able to provide some level of reassurance, but ensure that consultation is held with all sporting clubs that may be affected. It's definitely quite a tough couple of weeks for all of us. But I want to make sure that in finding a solution, when we're not going to be disadvantaging any clubs by doing anything without consultation. But I also want to make sure that the Royals are catered for this season. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Councillor Sharp, do you wish to speak to the amendment on the floor?
Thank you, Mayor. I am certainly happy to support this alternative or this amendment by Councillor Bedio, noting that personally I would prefer to see or to be endorsing quite a different motion. However, understanding all the politics at play, I am supporting Councillor Bedio in his efforts to find a resolution in this matter. As I'm only talking about the amendment here, I will focus on the fact that the proposed amendment in front of us actually proposes a way forward the situation definitely has not been fun for any of us, but it certainly has not been fun for any of the clubs involved. They have both they've both been extremely stressed about all this, and we need to find a resolution, but not a resolution which benefits just one club. And I'm very disheartened. I'm very disheartened by Councillor Isaa's proposed motion here, which effectively it effectively gives no recourse for the rules, nor gives them any actual wouldn't give them any actual comfort that their sport and their code is actually taken seriously by this council, or is even regarded by this council. All of our soccer clubs are watching here tonight. The FFV, everyone, they're all watching to see what actually happens, and to have a motion in front of us that actually says, no, we will be leaving everything as it is at Ormond Park, despite the fact that a soccer club has been ousted without any consultation or any agreement. I really enjoy hearing the detailed description from councillors that weren't here last year, and I really enjoy hearing the detailed description about what councillors think actually might well have happened, without actually probably even talking to the people that were directly involved. And that's what we lack here. That's what we've been lacking for a long time. Proper consultation and proper communication, and it certainly hasn't happened in this respect at all. So I'm very happy to look at the development of a sporting field allocation policy, which is severely lacking, because really we actually don't have one at all. We've got some user agreement that seems to be relied on, which doesn't benefit anybody. So happy to support this proposal. My time's probably just about to run out, but this is Council's chance to show our soccer clubs and the entire code that we do support the world game of soccer in Moonee Valley.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the amendment on the floor? Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Mayor. Look, I just wanted to pick up on a couple of points that Councillor Sharp's made there in terms of the difference between this proposed amendment and the substantive motion. I think I disagree that the amendment takes seriously the club's needs to the that the original motion doesn't also do that, because I think there are a lot of points of similarity between the two motions there, and I consider that this substantive motion, in committing to a municipal-wide soccer strategy and consideration of longer seasonal allocations for soccer clubs, does take seriously the needs of our soccer clubs in Moonee Valley. So I take issue with that point. I think it also, the substantive motion, Councillor Sharp suggests, gives no commitment to the Essendon Royals for helping them resolve their issues. And I note that at point F, there is a commitment there from Council to reconsidering the Royals' needs for their winter allocation moving forward. So I also take issue with that suggestion there. I think also the suggestion that the proposed amendment takes a forward step where the substantive motion doesn't is misleading, because the amendment proposes that we will return to discussions of the Ormond Park ground realignment, essentially taking us back to square one, whereas a substantive motion suggests that we should reassess at the point if the soccer strategy can't meet the needs of the Royals. It commits Council to reassessing the needs of the Royals and committing to work with them to assess those. So I think one of the issues that has plagued us with this process so far is that that the motion in front of council officers has limited solutions to the space at Ormond Park, and I seriously believe that we need to widen our view and seek solutions using all avenues available to us, and that's what I believe the substantive motion seeks to do. So I won't be supporting this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Isa.
Thanks, Mayor. There are two key differences between the amendment and the substantive motion, and really only two key differences. And they are, in point F, a reference to the 45 weeks per year being a key demand of the Royals, 45 weeks per year at Cross Keys being a key demand, and what happens if that key demand can't be met, and the amendment constrains and restricts the options following that, whereas, as Councillor Hodgson has articulated, the original motion broadens that quite deliberately to allow for other options to be canvassed and included. The reason that the substantive motion does not refer specifically to the request around 40 weeks per year at Cross Keys is twofold. Firstly, we don't offer that to any other club, and we just have to maintain consistency. We need to make sure that whatever requests are put forward by clubs, we can replicate for the 30 other clubs in the municipality, because if not, we are favouring.
Point of order, Mayor, please. There's 6 soccer clubs, not 30.
That's not a point of order, sorry, Councillor.
Sorry, I said 30 other sporting clubs. I know there are 6 soccer clubs, and there are 12 or 14 AFL clubs, and there are as many cricket clubs and netball clubs and all sorts of other sporting clubs, and we need to treat them all consistently. The other reason that I think it's incredibly problematic for council to set about promising one club 45 weeks per year at an oval is that we've had, or at Cross Keys, is that we've had a letter from Cricket Victoria today, and the letter from Cricket Victoria sets out very clearly for us that Essendon and Strathmore cricket clubs rely on Cross Keys to provide the range of opportunities for their members, the local community, to participate. We've got Dr. David Maddox, Board Chair of Cricket Victoria, writing to us today in response to the request by the Royals to have Cross Keys for an extended period, as 45 weeks would be. And so to ignore that letter and to suggest that that might be a key demand that we're going to make central in this motion, I think is very unwise and problematic of council, and quite disrespectful to the Strathmore and Essendon cricket clubs, and also of the board chair who took the time to write to us extensively today. So, look, they are the only key differences between the amendments, which has disappeared from the screen. The substantive motion does seek to ensure those other commitments to soccer, to the Royals, and to making sure that we respond appropriately to the needs that have been communicated. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Reiser. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the amendment? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. If there's one thing I've learned through this last couple of weeks is the size of every soccer pitch known to man, every size of football oval known to man, and even what cricket...
Microphone, Councillor Sypek.
Thank you. I won't restart again. I keep thinking back to where did all this start? What was ground zero? And ground zero was that the Essendon Royals lost a pitch. And it was as simple as that. And now it's perplexed itself into a monster that has become so complicated, so layered, and what is the fix for it? I don't know what the fix for it is. But I'm happy to support the amendment that Councillor Bedio put forward, because it does give a clear path for all codes and for all sports that we're talking about here. A lot of clubs in Moonee Valley have been traditionally in their own areas and in their own fields. But take, for example, the Essendon Football Club. They've outgrown Windy Hill. They've moved to Tullen Green. I think a lot of our clubs have outgrown where they've been working and playing as well. So when netball became became a very big thing a few years back. We created a netball hub at the Aberfeldy Primary School. We spent $10 million there, putting lights, courts, everything. Not only did we build one netball hub, we built two netball hubs. We built the second one that was down at Fairburn Park. So we built hubs to satisfy netball. We really, as a council now, need to look at creating hubs for football, for cricket and for soccer. We have to have a different way of thinking. We can't keep playing on certain ovals and certain fields. In regards to getting letters from sporting bodies like the soccer and cricket and all them, I'm really happy that they're taking interest in Moonee Valley with their lovely letters and their concerns. But have we seen any checks from them? No. Have we seen any dollars from them? No. But they're expecting us to cater for every single one of their needs. So when you add a check next to your letter, I'll be happy to read it and look at it thoroughly. So, Mr. Mayor, we need to think about having a completely different sporting strategy and how we're going to do things. Because if we can create hubs for netball, we can create hubs for cricket, for soccer, for football, and we're even going to create a hub for basketball in the very near future. But probably the only one that we won't be creating a hub for is probably Trugo, because we haven't got that many Trugo players.
Councillor Sypek, time.
Well, just a little bit of an extension.
Just to finish the sentence, please.
This needs to be a different way of thinking in Moonee Valley, ladies and gentlemen. And anybody who doesn't vote for Councillor Bettio's alternative is voting against all sporting communities in Moonee Valley.
Mayor, can I call a point of order under clause 45 that a councillor must not say something that is offensive or could be capable of being offensive, and I find those last statements by Councillor Sypek that anyone not supporting the amendment is not supporting sport to be capable of being offensive to councillors who support the amendment, do not support the amendment.
Councillor Isaac, can you just please say your point of order? Section 45 deals with how the chair can direct a councillor to withdraw a remark.
Yes, that is.
45 deals with how I direct a councillor to withdraw a remark.
A point of order can be made against any chair ruling, or against any. A point of order can be made against any governance rule, and so the point of order under clause 45 is that I'm saying that a councillor may not say anything that is offensive or capable of being offensive. That's the point of order I'm raising, and the statement by Councillor Sypek I find to be offensive. Thanks.
I'm sorry, again, section 45, my ruling is that refers to how I may direct a councillor to withdraw any remark, not subsequent what can be called for a point of order. So we'll continue. Councillor Sypek, you've finished speaking. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this amendment? There being none, Councillor Bettio, would you like to close?
Thanks, Mayor. I do feel I might need to defend myself to some degree, in that by no means is the amendment to cause any disrespect to the cricket clubs. In fact, the amendment was deliberately worded to ensure that nothing would happen without significant consultation with clubs. What it does provide, though, is a contingency. We have a club, being the Royals, who are screaming for help, and rightly or wrongly are using certain tactics to get that help. And I think that's one thing to consider. But the reality is they're short on ground. Now, the substantive doesn't necessarily provide a way forward other than we'll look at it. But that doesn't really give them any reassurance. The goal of the amendment is to state, well, this is what we're going to do, and if this doesn't work, we have this option for you, and we have a set timeline to get that to you. So I completely disagree that the amendment is disrespectful. We're definitely not necessarily promising anything at this point. It's still exploration, but a little bit more narrow and a little bit more specific, which is what the clubs are asking for. So, yeah, I guess that's it from me.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. I'm putting it to the vote, the amendment on the floor. All those in favour? Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Tyson. Those against? Councillor Byrne, Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa. The amendment is carried. So returning to the substantive motion, we've had Councillor Isa as a mover speak, Councillor Hodgson as the seconder. Councillor Bedio, you only spoke to move your amendment. Would you wish to continue?
I'm fine, thanks, Mayor.
Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. I enjoy the word being thrown around being disrespectful, because the situation that is unfolded at Ormond Park has been completely disrespectful to the Essendon Royal Soccer Club, yet they're just expected just to sit there, shut up and suck it up. I mean, really, it is beyond the pale about what has transversed here. That is, yeah, really. Actually, can I ask a point of clarification, please, Mayor?
This is your point of clarification.
A statement was made earlier about the lights at Ormond Park not being turned on tonight. Can I please have a point of clarification whether it actually occurred or not, please?
Sorry, the point of clarification, I don't know if we can confirm that other than... Councillor Isa, I'm sorry that you...
Point of order, I've been misquoted. That wasn't what I said earlier.
Dealing with the point of clarification. So the point of clarification was if the lights were turned off at 7 o'clock, unless there is any member of the council staff that could say yes or no, then I don't believe we can clarify that particular statement. So it's
no clarification. No. Okay.
Mayor, could I call a
yes?
Yes, could I call a point of clarification? Is there is there anyone in the room who can contradict the information that I was sent that soccer have turned the lights off at 7 p.m. when soccer training finished? So if there's anyone in the room who's able to verify that that's incorrect, feel free to speak, but that's the information that was sent by me this evening.
Councillor Isa, a point of clarification is a chance to get something clarified by the CEO or officers or the chair. It's not an opportunity to ask for a broad question.
Yeah, my point of clarification is through...
What is your point of clarification?
Through the Mayor, is there anyone in the room who can tell me that that message is incorrect?
That can't possibly be answered because I can't take a straw poll of everyone. So, Councillor Sharp, please continue.
Thank you, Mayor. I will try and I will be positive about this report in front of us because Councillor Bedio's amendment has been adopted by Council. So I will be positive about the future of soccer in Moonee Valley and what we as a council can do to achieve that. We refer to the soccer strategy in this motion and developing a sports field allocation policy, particularly addressing the potential for longer seasonal allocations for soccer clubs. So it was noted before that this target of 45 weeks a year is just for this the Essendon Royals, but actually we're looking at wholeheartedly across all soccer clubs, and it is stated to that fact in this motion. I believe we can achieve great outcomes for the Essendon Royal Soccer Club, who have been ousted.
So we've got a point of clarification. Yes, point of clarification, Councillor Isa.
So the point made was that the 45 weeks is for all soccer clubs in the motion. Could that be clarified, please? I can't see that.
So your point of clarification is the reference to 45 weeks.
I'm saying that we're looking...
Councillor Isa's point of clarification. Just say that again for me, Councillor Isa.
So the comment was made that the amendment seeks to look for 45-week allocations for all clubs, and I just can't see that in the amendment, so I just seek clarification, please.
Point of clarification, does the 45-week refer to all clubs as chair, I would say referring solely to what is on the board would be what the reference to 45 weeks is, being what is part of the motion.
For those who can't read that clearly with glasses, could you just say what that is, please, Mayor?
I will read it out. F. It is determined through the sporting field allocation policy that the Essendon Royals cannot access Cross Keys Reserve for more than 45 weeks per year, as it is requested in their proposal, as mentioned in Part E of this resolution. Council commits to immediately recommencing discussions in relation to the Ormond Park ground realignment option as per Part A of this resolution prior to the commencement of the summer allocation. Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. Clarifying point E, to be developed by the sports field allocation policy to be developed by Council before summer grounds allocation in 2021, in particular addressing the viability of longer seasonal allocations for all soccer clubs, or for soccer clubs. So, my point is, I do believe that we can achieve great outcomes for the Essendon Royal Soccer Club, who have been ousted for their home ground without any consultation or agreement. I would like to note that there is some incorrect information in this report, namely that there are not 3 senior pitches at Cross Keys, and that Football Victoria's senior pitch minimum requirements are 64 to 75 metres rather than 50 metres. Also noting that Essendon Royals are down at least one pitch, one ground. So point G refers to the request that this pitch is found for this current winter allocation. So the soccer strategy will be discussed at our next council meeting, and I look forward to seeing the improvements that can be made by this council, as I'm sure are all our soccer clubs. But we need to be communicating with our clubs. We need to be open and transparent. We need to tell our clubs what has been happening and what is happening. Nothing can happen in silos, and I...
Councillor Sharp, time if you just finish your sentence, please.
Yep, I am, again, I will state extremely disheartened by the some of the conversation and rhetoric used around this table tonight, but I am going to be positive. I'll leave it there.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to move an amendment.
Yes, what is your amendment?
I'd like to add a dot point H, please. Which reads that the CEO writes to all primary and secondary schools within the municipality to ask if they would like to have discussions with council regarding shared use of sporting fields, in brackets existing and non-existing.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. If you could just potentially take your laptop to governance.
I sent it to governance.
Oh, perfect. So we'll just wait for the screen to be updated. Then I'll reread it for those who are not on a good angle for viewing the screen.
I've also sent it to councillors, if they've got their emails.
The amendment before us is the addition of a point H to read that the CEO writes to all primary and secondary schools within the municipality to ask if they would like to have discussions with council regarding shared use of sporting fields, existing and non-existing. Do I have a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Beattie, I don't think you can. Councillor Tyson. Now, just before Councillor Byrne speaks, a reminder for the amendment, we are speaking to the specific point. Now, obviously, for the previous amendment, it was deleting a significant proportion of the motion and adding a fair bit, so it could be argued that a considerable, the range of what could be discussed was quite broad. This amendment is quite specific, so if we could please just leave debate to that entailed in point H. Councillor Byrne.
Thanks, Mayor. With this whole topic, I think one of the really big issues that we have here is obviously we're a landlocked municipality and we just do not have enough area and enough room for everyone to play their sport. We have a growing population which is going to significantly increase between now and 2040 and beyond, and we're not creating any more open space, and people are becoming very protective over it, and therefore we need to utilise it as best as we possibly can. Whilst I understand that council has a really big responsibility to do the best that we can with our own land, I think that it is really important that we really start getting the ball rolling on what primary and secondary schools within the municipality are doing with their land. They obviously use it between potentially 7 a.m. and you know, school hours or maybe slightly longer, but they often don't use it on weekends, and often they don't use it late in the afternoons or evenings. And I don't think it hurts to simply start the conversation. I know that there has been previous conversations with some schools. If the conversation seems to go really well at a school level, then we can obviously get the Department of Education involved. I think that it would be a wise move, whilst we used to be against investing anything on school property, I think it's actually realistic that if we don't do it, then going forward there'll be many, many kids in the future missing out on sport because we just don't have the facilities. So one of the ones that I know has been, can be looked at quite easily is obviously on Rochelle Road, the back of Essendon College. It's currently used for people to hit golf balls. Sometimes it's an unofficial dog park for maybe the 2 or 3 dogs that are there. Really, really underutilised land, and it is massive. And personally, I would love to see it somewhat being added into the sporting precinct within East Keilor. And I know that there'll be many other examples within the municipality that could be able to host, for instance, the Royals or the cricket club or whoever. We just really need to get the ball rolling, and I feel like we haven't done enough work in this space, and I look forward to seeing it being done.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. Councillor Tyson, do you wish to speak to this amendment? Does any other councillor wish to speak to this specific amendment? Councillor Isa.
It's a great amendment, thanks Councillor Byrne. I do note though that in the way that the previous amendment is phrased, if it is the case that as a result of this particular amendment, schools do come forward with some additional provision of land, that couldn't be used to solve the problems under the way that F is worded. So I wonder if there mightn't be a willingness to perhaps move another amendment following this that broadens F to allow, so that if the request of Royals can't be met, that perhaps something that comes out of this particular clause H might then be able to be put forward as a resolution in part F to providing more land. So I probably haven't worded that very well. It would require an additional amendment in any case, but it's a great way of trying to find more spaces. But the way that F is phrased means that anything that comes out of H can't be used to solve the problem that we're trying to solve right now.
Thank you, Councillor Isa. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this amendment? Councillor Bedio. And Councillor Bedio, I need to apologise. You didn't move or second the original motion, so I could have received you as the seconder for this amendment. So I apologise for that. Councillor Bedio.
Thanks, Mayor. Just in relation to Councillor Isa's comments, I can understand your intent, but I think we need to consider the fact that the Royals have a pavilion at Ormond Park with facilities there for running a sports club, and I don't necessarily think that, whilst I think this is a great idea from Councillor Byrne, I don't necessarily think that it's the solution for the Royals, and therefore I think that keeping Part F is valuable. Thanks.
Yes, point of clarification, Councillor Isa.
Is it the case that the Royals need a full-size pitch as well, though?
I think that's not a point of clarification that could be answered by officers unless they are able to answer that question, but they can't. No.
So no one knows if the Royals also need a full-size pitch.
So you
Sorry.
point of clarification through the chair,
Yep.
so I can see if there are any officers or the CEO is able to answer that. A point of clarification is not a chance to open up and ask a question of the broader group.
Okay, so through the chair, no one's able to answer the question as to whether the Royals need a full-size pitch, which might be able to come about through H, which might. The problem is, Mayor, is there anyone who's able to clarify whether the Royals are looking for a full-size pitch that might come about through point H?
Well, I can only direct that to officers, and the officers can't answer on behalf of a sporting club other than what's entailed within the report.
Mayor, can I finish?
You may. Councillor Bedio.
Further to that, Part G, that specifies that that we request the CEO to assist the Royals in finding an additional 65-metre soccer pitch. Part H could pertain and support Part G in that respect, but it doesn't necessarily replace their need for the pavilion and the 55 metres at Ormond Park if they don't have access to the 45 weeks at Crosskeys, if that makes sense. So I think that there is still merit in having H as it's worded because it could potentially support Part G. Sorry, I know this is getting quite convoluted. But in response to Councillor Isaacs' point of clarification, obviously I'm not a representative of the club, but from my discussions with the club, they are still short one 65-metre pitch, which is why this was included in my amendment. And that's not including the need for the 50 metre at Ormond Park if the 45 weeks is not available at Crosskeys. I hope that makes sense.
Thank you, Councillor Bedio. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this specific amendment? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Mayor. Happy to look into point F as moved by Councillor Byrne. Moved by Councillor Byrne. Noting though, this is probably something that probably is best discussed with the soccer strategy because it's only going to confuse things. But in the spirit of talking to primary and secondary schools, fine. But I think the councillors that have been on council for quite a while know that anything to do with schools unfortunately takes years to come to fruition. So we've got a date on here that we're looking at getting information back, and there is no way in hell that we're going to A, get a response, or B, suddenly find a pitch at a primary or secondary school within the next 3, 6, 12 months, most likely. Great sentiment though, and we certainly should be investigating it, but let's actually really think about the implications. It took us about 6 years to get the Aberfeldy netball courts done with the school agreement, and it wasn't actually a pretty process, so thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sharp. Does any other councillor wish to speak to this specific amendment? Councillor Hodgson.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd just like to note, thank Councillor Byrne for bringing this amendment. Hopefully put a sprinkling of optimism in there. Councillor Sharp, noting your experience in the past, hopefully we can have a different outcome this time round. Happy to support this because I think it goes to what I've originally spoken to having all options and all solutions on the table when we are trying to address the issue that's come before us. So yeah, certainly supportive of the amendment.
Thank you, Councillor Hodgson. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the specific amendment? If not, Councillor Byrne, would you like to close?
Thank you, Mayor. I will just briefly. So I suppose that by contacting the school, it's definitely not the one solution. This is such a complex issue that there will not be one issue. It may just be a piece to the puzzle to help things. I fully respect that clubs need pavilions and change rooms, and they like to run canteens and they like to have functions, and I don't think that schools will necessarily be able to offer that side or necessarily all of that. So it's definitely not the solution, but it may help them out. And whilst I completely note what Councillor Sharp said, that it can take years to be able to get funding and work with the school, there might be pre-existing fields that could be used. So there might not be construction cost, and therefore community clubs could go onto them. And if it does take years to do, well, I'd prefer to be in 6 years' time looking back going, oh, I'm really glad I moved Amendment H back in 2021, because in 2027 we finally, have these soccer pitches for little ones like this who may want to play soccer in the track, so down the track. So I suppose if we don't get the ball rolling, it'll never happen. We don't have enough land in Moonee Valley, so let's work together, be proactive. There's state elections next year. We can put pressure on the powers above and see what we can actually do, because at the end of the day, we're doing it for the community. It doesn't need to be schools versus council or anything like that. I just think working together, and at the end of the day, the more players that we can get out on a football pitch, a soccer pitch, whatever, any pitch, the better. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Byrne. I'll put that amendment to the vote. All those in favour? It's carried unanimously. Move to the substantive, and Councillor Byrne, you were yet to speak when you moved that amendment. Did you wish to speak to the substantive?
No, that's fine.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Sypek.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Let me first start by saying the Essendon Cricket Club is a fantastic club in this municipality. It's always been a fantastic club. They've produced Australian players and state players. So the Essendon Cricket Club have been a great contributor to Moonee Valley. And so have the Royals. The Royals are a very, one of the biggest soccer clubs in Victoria, and they're an NPL side, and we should be proud to have an NPL side in our municipality, and not to, give them a clip across the year every 5 minutes. We need to look after both cricket and soccer and football and any other sports, because Moonee Valley has a great sporting tradition. We need to support them. We need to look for a logical way forward. We don't need to be tarnishing our own clubs. We should be speaking positively of all of our clubs and not saying they didn't do this, they didn't turn the lights on, or they're not doing this, not doing that. We should stop this bickering and start looking at positives. Let's get together, let's get this done, and let's get it done quickly and amicably as possible and get a good result for all codes in Moonee Valley.
Thank you, Councillor Sypek. Does any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? Councillor Tyson.
Just a point of clarification, Mayor, through you. Just with point G in the substantive motion, what does the CEO's assistance look like? Is that a financial commitment? How does governance or the CEO interpret that? Am I allowed to ask that through a
again, we
point of clarification?
Deciding on the motion, and then it's up to the officers to enact our resolution. So I would suggest that once the motion is carried, then it would be the CEO to determine what point G refers to. I don't think it's appropriate to get that determination on the spot, and that's consistent with the rulings that I've made throughout this term. Did you want to speak any further to the motion, Councillor Tyson? All right, so any other councillor wish to speak to the motion? If not, based on the precedent made last meeting.
Based on the governance rules, Mayor.
Sorry?
It's based on the governance rules. It's what the governance rules say.
Sorry, if I may, as chair, if I may actually continue, based on the precedent set in regards to the interpretation of section 31, an amendment once carried, 31.2, the mover of the amendment will have a right of reply. Councillor Bedio, would you like to close? Councillor Byrne, would you like to close? And mover of the original motion, Councillor Iser, would you like to close?
Yeah, I'd like to say a couple of things. Firstly, I appreciate Councillor Sypek that I don't wish to speak ill of anyone in this chamber, and I think I've made that clear by commending Councillor Sharp for her efforts. But last Friday night I received a text message from the President of the Royals saying that that they were happy to turn the lights on, but please keep in mind that it's a one-off until our needs at the Royals are met. And I think it is completely unacceptable for anyone, officers or councillors, to be sent text messages from presidents of football clubs saying that unless something, a request is acquiesced to, such as 45 weeks per year, at a ground that is already being used by 2 cricket clubs, and who will be displaced should that request in F be met. I think it's unacceptable that we would allow that behaviour from a club, and I will be taking steps to write to the President of the Royals to express that it is inappropriate to demand of anyone in that particular way. The other thing that I think is particularly lacking resolution here is that on one hand we have a request for 45 weeks at an oval that will displace cricket clubs, and on the other hand the request is for 50-metre pitch at Ormond Park. Now those two things are somehow being weighed up against each other. If we don't get 45 weeks at Cross Keys, therefore we need 50 metres at Ormond Park. The requests have been inconsistent, not made a lot of sense, and don't seem to have matched needs, demonstrated needs. Now, everything I've said tonight has been documented in written evidence. I can produce that for anyone who would like it. What this motion does is it says that if we don't displace 2 cricket clubs, we will be back here having exactly the same conversation about exactly the same issue, which we will, because I can't see us displacing 2 cricket clubs.
Finish your sentence. Thank you. We'll put that to the vote. All those in favour? Councillor Adams, Councillor Bedio, Councillor Byrne, Councillor Nation, Councillor Sharp, Councillor Sypek, Councillor Tyson. Those against? Councillor Hodgson, Councillor Isa. That motion is carried. Councillors, we move to item 11, notices of motion. And
Thank
there is
God.
no notice of motions on the agenda tonight. So we move to item 12, urgent business. And councillors, do we have any urgent business? There being none, we move to confidential reports, item 13, and there are no confidential reports this evening. So that concludes the business on tonight's agenda. We thank those watching the meeting tonight online, and I declare this meeting closed. Good night.